What's happening, everyone, and welcome back to the Pathways to Success podcast. On the show today, I have Cameron Gawley, and he is the CEO and co-founder of BuzzShift, a digital strategy agency for mid-size and large brands. A serial entrepreneur and growth hacker, he started his first IT service company at the age of 18. He went on to build an online data backup company that preceded Dropbox and Box.net before co-founding BuzzShift in 2010. Cameron's true north is growth, and he works to help high-potential tech companies and mid-market brands with their go-to-market and growth strategies. Besides leading BuzzShift, he's an advisor and investor in numerous tech startups, teaches digital marketing analytics at Southern Methodist University, and is designing his own line of messenger bags. Cameron, welcome to the podcast, man. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and shout out to Mike Monet.
Yeah, for sure. Mike, man, hooked us up to connect us. That was awesome. So great dude. He's over at Vitamin T.
Yeah,
great creative staffing company. So those guys, he just reached out to me. We've known each other a long time, and he's like, man, you got to know Julian. So thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, I appreciate the connection. Without him, this collaboration could not be possible. So well, Cameron, I want to learn a little bit more about you as a person and as an entrepreneur. You started your first business at 18, and I was not thinking about starting companies at that age. So walk us through a little bit of the genesis of your entrepreneurial story.
Yeah, so I would say it actually predicates even before that. Like, you know, Gary Vee and I kind of have a very similar story on that, where we were both hustling, where at 12 years old, I'm at baseball card shows selling baseball cards. I was a vendor, and I was this little kid just flipping baseball cards, basically buying packs and reselling them. And so at that point, I was like, man, this is really interesting. You buy a 50-cent, pack of baseball cards and find one card in there, and it might be worth $10, and you can sell it for that. And I was like, that was the first way of me like really making money. And then fast forward, I was working honestly as a Subway sandwich artist, at 16 years old, saying, my dad's like, hey, what do you think about doing next? I'm said, well, I think I'm going to go work at McDonald's. And he's like, no. Like, I don't think that's an option, right? He goes, you're not going to go work at McDonald's. And I was like, what do you mean? And he said, I think you need to go get a job in computers. You love computers, like just go out and do that. So literally right at 16 going on 17, I just got my first car. I went to this little computer shop that's actually right down the street from where we're at right now in Addison, and they were hiring for an assembler building computers. And so I started my whole career, honestly, assembling computers. These guys gave me a chance, paying me $6 an hour or whatever, building computers. And so from there, I learned like the entire world, honestly. That was the opportunity that kind of presented itself to learn computers. Fast forward, I got into managed services. So that was basically IT services and working with small businesses. And then in college, kind of even a little bit further there, I basically was working on these ad agencies. I was working for a lot of different ad agencies with their computers because an ad agency at the time, it was kind of like the Mac world and the PC world. And it was kind of Macs versus PCs. And so again, this dates me a little bit, but 1999, going back to the late 90s on this, that was the world we lived in. And so they needed people to fix both and basically network these all together. And so I learned a lot about like process, actually what was going on in advertising agencies and helping them on the tech side. And then I realized I was at Richard's Group, actually, of all people, and I saw this closet that was stacked with hard drives. And then we had a couple other clients. There's a launch agency up here, and they had closets full of hard drives, and it was all their creatives basically were storing all these images and raw creative on these hard drives. And I'm like, oh my God, if the building burns down, literally they're going to lose everything. So I kind of investigated and moved that needle forward and said, okay, what about online data backup? Like no one's really playing into that world. And so I basically white labeled a software out of China and started a company called Boomerang Data. And basically it was a backup software and a lot of it was advertising agencies. And so, I came from the tech world, long and short of it. And in 2007, it was like my aha moment. I'm at South by Southwest. I see Twitter of all things go from 20,000 to 60,000 tweets in one day. And that was really the inflection point for me to be like, holy crap, like the way we communicate as brands, entrepreneurs, technologists, marketers, advertisers, like everybody, the way we fundamentally communicate as a world is completely going to change. So it wasn't like Facebook or Snapchat or Instagram or anything like that was like my aha, like, whoa, this is big. And 2007, I was still doing online data backup, making really good money, but at the same time, like I wasn't fulfilled. Like the work-life balance was really important to me, and I was working at the data center till 4 or 5 in the morning, and I'm just like, how can I do things a little bit different? And so 2 years later, we started a thing called Social Media Club of Dallas here. And I met my now business partner, Eddie Badrina. And Eddie, it was kind of interesting. Him and I kind of connected, and we started this digital agency called BuzzShift. And it was kind of like, we're going to walk through this and we're going to try it out and see if this actually works. We didn't even have a formal operating agreement or anything like that. And this is 2010. And so Eddie and I basically built this growth agency, and we said, I look at agencies, especially ad agencies right now, and I'm like, they don't understand the world of digital. They're not digitally led. They just kind of bolt in digital at the time. Like they were really good at like creating brands, and they were product centric and everything else, but they weren't really focused on growing companies. And so I learned through a couple of friends at McKinsey and Deloitte and everything else. I was like, man, this is really interesting. Why couldn't we be like consultants on the front end, but then actually execute these great strategies on the back end through data, strategy, and creativity? And so I was like, that's really what I wanted to do. So the last 9 years, that's what we've been doing, is growing a digital growth agency, working with a lot of great brands.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing, man. Well,
that was a long-winded version.
No, that was awesome. Yeah. So just so we're all operating from the same premise, and
Sure.
this is really about helping businesses and brands grow, and I know that's your true north. So what is a brand?
Yeah. So, what's interesting is I think the way we look at brands and even like marketing specifically, everything has become more dynamic. There was this time and period that a billboard basically did all the work for us, right? We could actually sell products by putting something on a billboard or doing a TV ad and selling products and everything else. And I think the way we look at a brand overall, things have changed, and how we go to market. And if you look at it, and again, I was talking about a bunch of ad agencies. Like if you look at, the majority of all these ad agencies and companies that are out there, like the WPPs, the Omnicoms, the Publicists, like, not to call out like all these, but if you add up the big like 5, that makes it for like $60 billion worth of revenue, right? And it's ridiculous. But what I've seen is a lot of these companies have actually had a hard time shifting into the digital world. And so I think that brands now are super customer centric. The ones that are really doing a great job are super customer centric and are dialed into the customer. They're not so much product and brand focused as they once were. They're being very customer led, and they're so empathetic that it doesn't really matter what the creative director really thinks anymore. And I think that that's the one thing that, if I look at the old traditional ad agency model, I think that there's a lot of outdated marketing strategies out there. And so that was the reason why we exist, honestly, is because I was like, the way that they're going to market is taking it from a true marketing angle and not like a business acumen kind of angle where it's like, okay, what's our unique selling prop and how are we really going to connect with our audience in a unique way? They went straight for the tactic of like, what's the hex code or what's the color going to be, or the logo mark, and they get really into the branding side of it. And I think that when we look at a brand overall now, the challenges we tackle and the way we do things have all changed. The tools that we have at our fingertips have all changed. And so at the end of the day, I would just say, if you look at where we're at now, we are at we all have kind of established this shiny object syndrome. There's so many tools out there. We're obsessed with technology more than ever. And it's because, I look at 2011, there was like 150 advertising technology tools on the market. Now there's like over 7,000 tools on the market, right? Mm-hmm. So like all these salespeople are like selling all these brands and all these consumers and everything else, all this all these tools and tactics, and at the heart of it, there's people there, and they're trying to go very tactical, and they're missing the boat when it comes to the strategy on how they go to market. So I think at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of outdated marketing strategies, but I don't know that answer your question overall, but I think as a brand, like brands are evolving a lot, and they're having to evolve. And I think that fundamentally even comes into how people hire and build companies. I look at it even from the marketing angle of, a lot of CMOs of a lot of these big retail companies that we look at even here, they're getting forced out. And the reason why they're getting forced out is because there's a lot of marketers out there that one are kind of the legacy marketer that doesn't understand the technology. And there's a lot of technologists out there that are not really passionate about the marketing. I think the best CMOs now are like true like CMTOs. They're chief marketing technology officers. They're marketers who understand the technology, and technologists that are truly passionate about the marketing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where things are evolving. And so what's happened is, we've gotten to this world around brands where a lot of them are spiraling, especially in retail. And I think the Atlantic called it the retail apocalypse we're kind of living in right now. And, I look at, 10 of the big corporations here in Dallas even that are retailers. And I'm like, 5 years from now, they won't be here. And it's because they're so either brand focused or they're so product focused, and they're not so empathetic and dialed into their customer and their needs of their customer. And how do we actually connect with them in a new way?
So what does that discovery session sort of feel like when you work with your clients, right?
Yeah.
Because you said it's not necessarily the brand or even the product, but what's the problem you're trying to solve? What does it sound like?
Yeah, exactly. So I what that looks like is really, I think at the core, like the best brands out there need to go to the kind of reflect and look at, if you're an existing brand, kind of reflect and look at what is our overall brand strategy, and, how are we connecting with our audience in the right way. But then from a go-to-market strategy perspective, that's kind of the step 2 of like, okay, now how do we do it, right? It's not tools first. And so from a process standpoint, there's a thing from Forrester Research that's called the POST methodology, right? And I fundamentally think the POST methodology is like the one thing that sticks in my mind like every day, where I think every marketer should stick in. So POST is actually, people, objective, strategy, technology. And I think that, the T is the technology, the tactics, the tools. And that's the stuff that we get excited about, right? Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, it really starts with the people. And so understanding who your people are, what are your objectives of what you're trying to do. Let's build a strategy first, and then let's figure out, does that need to be on Instagram or on YouTube or what? Like, I think people get really excited and they go, okay, let's just go, promote some content on Instagram and we're going to sell more product. And that fails for 99% of marketers. And that's the thing. And they're like, oh, Instagram doesn't work or whatever. And it's because they don't have the right strategy. Right. And so I think if you can build a really good go-to-market strategy, then you're setting yourself up for success. So I would say, part of that is I think that the best strategies out there, if I look at some of the fastest growing brands out there, like Casper, for instance. So I look at a brand like, Casper, who has completely displaced like a company like Mattress Firm out of Houston. They're bankrupt. And it's because, if you look at a group like Mattress Firm, they sold like 60 different mattresses, and all different variations and everything else. And it's like the paradox of choice. And like a customer doesn't want that experience anymore. And so Casper came in and said, no, we're going to sell one type of mattress and we're going to do it in 4 different sizes and we're going to do it really well. And by the way, it's going to come shipped to you next day through your door. And if you don't like it, send it back in 90 days or whatever. So I think what's interesting is overarching, like, the way these direct consumer and digitally native vertical brands have really taken off over the last 3 to 5 years. And they've displaced a lot of these traditional retail brands. And so, those are things I'm really passionate about is really exploring how it's not that retail is dying. I think that retail can thrive. I just think that it has to evolve. And so I think marketers have to evolve. And I think that, how we go to market with specific content has to evolve. So there's a lot of evolution in how we go to market because technology changed everything. We're not in those days of like being able to put a billboard up and it's just working, and people buying products. So if you're obsessed with your customer, I would say, starting with your customer journey, understanding where, I think most people treat their customers kind of like this cable TV kind of world where it's basically like very disconnected. So it's like whatever you see at 5 o'clock on channel 5 is what I see at 5 o'clock on channel 5. And I don't think that's the world we live in anymore. It's the cable TV approach. And that's how marketing's been done. It's kind of like out there, it's accessible to all, and it's very chronological, and we just shove content out there. And that doesn't really work. And so what's working is this kind of Netflix approach to social and the Netflix approach to your brand. It's to understand that, when you, Julian, open up Netflix, you're consuming content. It's a direct reflection of the content you consume, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's the same with me. Our Netflix are going to look completely different. And I think that Netflix has their go-to-market down. And I think that if we can take a little bit of what Netflix is doing from a strategic standpoint and saying, hey, if we can like really hone in on where that person is in their journey with our brand, and then connect to them and personalize this in a way. And that's the greatness of like social, honestly, paid social specifically, is that, on Facebook and Instagram, you can target people really, really well and effectively, but you have to know where they're at with your brand. Do they even know your company? Are they in the consideration phase? Are they ready to buy your product right away? Because I think traditionally we just want to shove down this conversion content like buy now, buy now, buy now. Mm-hmm. And people aren't ready to buy now. And so I think it's knowing where people are at in that journey is super important.
So can you give me an example of that, an execution of how that works?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, if you take like a brand, like if you introduce a new brand, so one of the brands that we're working on is I'll just use this example. So there's a company called Muwala that started actually here, a guy named Jeff Richards, and they have a banana milk, and they actually have an oat milk brand and everything else. But they kind of saw this market, and they saw a market opportunity to say, hey, how can we basically, come up with a dairy-free alternative? And they saw banana milk as an option, and also oat milk, which is a big, dairy-free alternative to milk. And so what's interesting is you're introducing a new product out there to the market. When you introduce that to the market, how you connect with somebody that has no clue what banana milk is, it's all about engagement. It's about getting them it's about adding value back to their lives. It's about giving them some type of, something to engage with really at the heart of it. And that's the awareness play, right? It's really, awareness is all about engagement at that point. And consideration's more like, hey, if you're targeting the right people, whether it's a vegan or a healthy mom or whatever it might be, then the fact is in that consideration phase you might show them a recipe or whatever else or something on that lines, versus conversion content, which is like basically going to the store, you can find it at Whole Foods or whatever else. Like it's really driving action, right? And I think that as marketers, the first thing we want to do is we want people to drive action. Well, it's like, no, but we want actually people to get to know our brand first, and we need to add value first. And I think that that's been the biggest challenge for most marketers, especially from traditional marketing tactic, is they want people just to take action and go buy right away. And that's just not how we do things, especially when it comes to digital.
Interesting. So yeah. It's not enough just to know what your customer wants, but sort of where they are in the consideration and buying process.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what are the tools that you can use to time that?
So interesting. There's and again, going back to tools. So I'm trying to be tool agnostic, because there's so many different tools out there. But I think really mapping out that customer journey and understanding that everything from awareness to consideration to conversion to loyalty and advocacy, like all the way through that journey specifically, is mapping out. I think the key thing to think about is there may be we were talking with a brand yesterday that does an on-demand kind of a beauty app, and what's interesting is they have a lot of women that are between 22 and 30 years old that actually basically use their services. And then they also have a lot of 55 plus. And so I'm like, okay, you're talking millennials over here, and then you're talking little like boomers over here. I'm like, the way we connect with a millennial woman that has a household income of, whatever, $70,000, $80,000 or whatever, that person is way different than that 55-year-old plus woman. And so I think it's not a, this non-personalized kind of approach doesn't work anymore. So it's about, it's not creating one piece of content that is applicable to all. It's about creating specific pockets of content that are specific to those individual audiences. So I think it's less about the tool and it's more about the process. That's where I'm getting at. And so I think if you can really start segmenting out, like thinking through, like who are these customers, and then what are the brand affinities that they're, it's beyond just their demographics and psychographics and everything else. It's like, well, what other brands do they like buy or interact with on a daily basis and everything? And I think the people that are really doing marketing well in this day and age are the ones who are super dialed into all those different audience segments and then having content to support those people. Because that's the reason why the commercial approach, the cable TV approach doesn't work, because you're trying to basically blanket your message to all people, and so therefore no one buys, right? Is because it's not personalized. So we see beer brands now, like somebody will there's a company we're working with, and they are launching a new IPA, and what's interesting is like they're going after like people that are turning 25. Well, you can target those people that are just turning 25 because they think that in college they just drank light beer, and then and now all of a sudden you're 24, 25 years old, now you've graduated into IPAs or something. And I was like, okay, that's a good hypothesis, you can test that whatever you want to do, but it was just interesting what they said on that. But you can target those people and specifically and have that great messaging and content that resonates. So I mean, there's so much the creative that goes in, that's involved in this, and the process that's involved is much more intricate and much more dynamic than ever before. But I will say that if you do it right and you follow a really good process, then you're going to be really successful.
Gotcha. What does it mean to be a T-shaped marketer, and why is this important for us to consider?
Yeah. So, the one thing about so there's this concept around T-shaped marketers, and you can Google it around T-shaped marketers. But I think is really interesting is that at the end of the day, when we talk a lot about HR and hiring and what we're looking for and a really good marketer. And I think that at the end of the day, you find a lot of people that have this deep expertise in something, and they're really specialized, right? And so it's like a channel expertise. Maybe they're really good at Google AdWords, or they're really good at, it could be an accountant that's really good at whatever. I mean, you could take it across all different disciplines. And so what's interesting is that we're finding a lot of people that are very deep in something, but they're not necessarily wide. And so when I say wide, that's their width of knowledge, right? And I think their width of knowledge plays into all these different disciplines. So if you look at the world of digital marketing, I don't care if it's SEO or UX or PPC or Facebook ads or whatever it might be. The fact is that being that kind of jack of all trades, or that width of knowledge, whatever you want to call it, is really important. But then at the same time, owning up and like really diving in deep on 1, 2, or 3 different disciplines is really important. So I think the best marketers out there are dabblers. They're kind of jack of all trades. They understand the holistic side of all the aspects, whether it's UX, a little bit of dabbling in code over here, a little dabbling in whatever, just to have context to understand. Because, it's funny because I know people that, are great paid media managers, for instance, that run Google AdWords and they do, or Google Ads now, and they do a bunch of things really well. But then like when they get into the analytics side, they really don't understand it. So they're placing media, but then I'm like, okay, but you don't understand like how this, what this looks like on the back end. So I'm like expanding that knowledge really into analytics and insights and be able to make really good observations and recommendations out of that. Like that's expanding that width. So I think the best marketers out there are the ones that not only have that width of knowledge, but have explored and really owned it's like, these are the 3 disciplines that I'm like just going to own. And so it forms this T basically, right? So you have the width and then you kind of have the depth. And I think that, every marketer should kind of evaluate, where are you at as a T-shaped marketer? So I think it's something you should kind of reflect on and think about, okay, like, what other aspects of digital marketing should I learn a lot more about and kind of dabble in, right? Because those are the best marketers. Like, so even people that are, when we talk about practitioners, people like that are on the leadership side, I'm a huge fan of always staying dirty, right? And that means like, basically, like, if you're a creative director, for instance, or a chief creative officer, I still think that, you should spend 5 to 10% of your time like in Adobe products, actually dabbling in Premiere or something like that, because I think understanding the context of, what you're designing, that's really important. And that's what actually got a lot of the CMOs in trouble with where they're at, is that a lot of these traditional CMOs, they don't understand the technology because they're not staying dirty. They have all these people that they've delegated, which is great, but it's like, you need to at least keep your hands in the pot a little bit. And so I think that plays into your T-shaped marketer as well.
So you mentioned leadership and leadership marketing leaders, and I know that's something that you're passionate about talking about. What have you discovered about leadership for sure?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great question. I think that, this is my 3rd tech and marketing startup, since I was 18 now. And so what I've learned is, my 20s, my second startup, I guess you learn all your key learnings in your 20s or something. I don't know. No, I'm just kidding. But, what's interesting around leadership is my co-founder of my previous company, him and I, we had never taken like a StrengthsFinders, like a Gallup StrengthsFinders or something like that. And later on, we actually did. And this is like post us, like me moving on to a different company and him going into a different world as well. Him and I actually did take the StrengthsFinders, and we actually overlapped like 4 out of 5 strengths, top 5 strengths. So what I learned from a leadership perspective is to really, we use Gallup StrengthsFinders, for instance, to really say, okay, from an executive leadership team or even from a mid-level manager team or whatever else, it's like, how are you offsetting yourself from a core strength perspective? And I think that from a leadership, like Eddie and I, that's a good example. Eddie Badrina, my co-founder of BuzzShift, him and I offset each other. All of our core strengths really basically offset each other. So what I've learned from a leadership perspective is we're control freaks. I mean, at the end of the day. And delegating and giving up things to other people to know that they're probably going to get like 80% of the way there. But like, if I was to do this myself, I would get 100%. Like, this is the way it would be or whatever. And I think that being okay with the 80% is good. And you have to be okay with it. And so the hardest thing that leaders have to do is let go and actually delegate. And so, and understand their core strengths. And so, like, for instance, for me, like, even though I'm a builder, I'm a starter, I create things, I love doing that. Like, if you look at my top 5, I don't have an execution strength in there. I'm like, what is that? I have all these strategic strengths and I'm a wooer and all these things, but where's the execution? Neither does Eddie. And so I'm like, so at the top, what I've noticed is a lot of like key executives actually don't have great execution qualities, which is weird. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense. And I'm like, do I need to take this test again or whatever else? But what we've found is honestly, we're super strategic, and it kind of offsets, and we can think through things, and we're good people and whatever. And so at the end of the day, it really comes down to like having a really good team of executors and people that can really do offset you. And so like, I can tell you, every single person we've ever hired that's been a really good hire, they've all had a core execution strength, right? And so one of those top 5, I know Gallup StrengthsFinders kind of like they've evolved their test a little bit, but every single one of those people have had some type of execution strength and some type of strategy in there as well. And so that's kind of how we hire. Like, we hire culture and strengths over skill set. And I think that, a lot of people look at a resume and they're like, oh my God, look, they came from this agency or they did this and da-da-da. But then when they come in and be a part of our world, then it just wouldn't work. And so on paper, it looks great because on skill sets, but then from a strengths perspective, like I really do value, honestly, when it comes down to strengths, like I think being strategic and being, especially in a digital strategy agency, and that's more applicable to us than anything, but we're strategically shifting our clients and it's like, well, they've been going this trajectory in this way for forever, and they need to pivot. And so we have to have a lot of people on our team that are strategic and then also can execute. I mean, I think that's the key, is just knowing your strengths and understanding your weaknesses there.
That's interesting because, I'm a talent acquisition guy.
Yeah.
I've been in hiring for 11 years.
Sure.
Do you have all your applicants take StrengthsFinder?
Yeah. So every single person, that's a good question. So we actually have a spreadsheet. So we gift every single one of our applicants, every single applicant that comes to us that it meets face to face. We gift them a StrengthsFinders book. And now we don't actually give out the book. Now it's the code. And so we give them the code. The first thing after that first interview, we have them give us their top 5 strengths. We actually don't put salary requirements on there too, but that's a whole conversation. We say, what's your salary? What are your requirements on that? And so we let them define their salary requirements and give us your top 5 strengths. And what we do is we actually put that into a spreadsheet. So we have this like glorified Google spreadsheet. We're actually going to put it in an Airtable, but this Google spreadsheet has every applicant since 2009 in it. And since we started, like literally going into 2010, we every single person. And so Eddie and I have taken it probably 2 or 3 times ourselves just to see how things have evolved. But we put all those applicants in there. And then like as people, what's interesting is a couple of people that haven't worked out over the years were like, okay, let's reflect on that, and let's look at their core strengths. And so 2 of those people that didn't work out actually overlap 4 out of 5 strengths. And so we're like, okay, watch out when we see this. I forget what the specifics are on them, but I could pull them up. And so, StrengthsFinders and then overlapping that in context with the team that they're going to work on is really important. So like if they're on the data team or they're on the strategy team or on the development team or whatever they might be on, it's like, if you put a bunch of people that all overlap the same strengths, I honestly think that they're going to butt heads. Give it 60 days, 90 days, those 2 are going to butt heads, and it's going to happen. And so it's happened every single time for us. Maybe that's just how it's played out, but so we kind of live and breathe by StrengthsFinders on that. Like that's how we define a lot of that's how we define all of our applicants, honestly.
That's really interesting, man.
Yeah.
So I was actually going to ask, have there ever been any false positives? And it sounds like there was overlap in the team.
There was. That's happened multiple times on the false. It has happened. We've also, had a situation where we're like, they proved to us that they have a execution strength, and we're like, they're showing us all these examples and all this stuff. And so honestly, we've seen it, and then we're like, oh my God, like, did we just get tripped or something? Because they come on for 90 days or whatever else, and then all of a sudden, like, they're not hitting on all cylinders. So we've actually hired 1 person or 2 people that haven't had an execution strength, but they've kind of shown us how they have executed in a different way. And then 90 days in or whatever else, it just hasn't worked out. So I mean, again, it's proven true almost every time that it works for us. So I know that they're redoing the test right now, so they've kind of gone like through how they actually show all the strengths like in a list or something. But Eddie's been hard about making sure that that's been deployed to pretty much every single. I don't think we've had one candidate that hasn't taken StrengthsFinders, so it's pretty wild.
So as far as so I'm curious, throughout your interview process, are there ways that you go about validating the strength?
It's funny. So we have specific questions based on those kind of roles and everything, but I would say that, it's not necessarily validating. I think that the validating the strength comes in like, I mean, for us, heavy on the one that is really hard to hire for us is like strategy. Strategy roles is really hard to hire. When it comes to like, and I'll tell you why in a sec. When it comes to like, creative, when it comes to, if you're an animator or a motion designer or a, whatever it is, I mean, your work really shows, but then also like, a lot of that validation is we do reference checks, and we actually, call a lot of their past hires and bosses and everything else, because what's interesting, and a lot of people in Dallas, like everybody knows everybody in this space, and Dallas is a really tight knit group, and so people are like, are you going to call I was like, yeah, actually, I'm going to let, whatever. So we've actually called people that have worked with them and everything else. So there, I would say through that process, that's a question for Eddie, because he's usually in that meeting, and he gets pretty strategic when it comes to, so Eddie was Bush's Asian American spokesperson at the White House. So he was worked under Colonel Powell. So he's like the most strategic person in our whole agency, right? And so like him and I, he's like corporate communications and worked at the White House and all that stuff. So I'm like, Eddie definitely asks the questions around that I would say cater to those core strengths, and that validates that. So, and they kind of just come out of air. Like, I'm like, can you like document and write those down? Because I need to ask those on the next person we interview. But he's usually good at, because we sit in a lot of those usually the second interviews. Since we're still a small team of 20 plus people, I would say that we still sit in a majority of the second interviews. And he asks a lot of those validating questions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And have you, before sort of focusing on StrengthsFinders, have you, played with, PI or Myers-Briggs or DISC or anything like that? Or
yeah, so we have. Myers-Briggs is definitely something that people bring up. PI, like I think it's, a lot of people use it. For us, it's really been StrengthsFinders, because really, it's been something we've deployed and it's worked for us. And Myers-Briggs is always good to know. It's a good to know kind of thing. And so there's a lot of, introverts that are basically extroverted tendencies that come out, especially in the agency world. But I think that overall it hasn't, Myers-Briggs hasn't, we haven't deployed it in a way that it would affect us on how we hire necessarily. But maybe that's just because we're not using it properly, or we're not using it right. So I know that we use, there's a thing called strengths-based leadership that goes in with StrengthsFinders. So the reason why we've used StrengthsFinders specifically over others is because it goes into like how people need to be led. And I think that, understanding how others need to be led is that's the empathy side of this, where it's basically different people need to be led different ways. And so, how you can connect with somebody, I can look at our group and how dynamic our team is, and I can, put two people in like when we do reviews and everything else, I'm like, I know how to get dialed in with this person, and that's completely different approach to this person, and it really plays into their strengths-based leadership. So there's a whole thing with Gallup that goes into, it's a great book, honestly. We've read it multiple times, and it really plays into how people need to be led in different ways. So I think that is something that a lot of entrepreneurs, if they haven't read it, it's something, if you're leading a team, I would definitely encourage you to check it out. So yeah, I think the overarching, that's something that would help validate.
I think that's definitely a great addition to anyone's hiring practice, to be honest with you. I don't think that's just done enough. What are your top 5?
Oh man, you're going to call me on the spot. So this week, no. Let's see, Woo, strategic. Oh my God, now you're going to put me on the spot. Now I totally forgot my other 3 right now. I haven't taken it like 3 years, 4 years. I'll have to pull it up and I'll give it to you. But cool. I know Woo and strategic are 2 in there, so I just can't remember all the rest right now. Yeah. Futuristic is 1. Now they're coming. But yeah.
I could see that. Okay, cool, man. Well, let's close with one more aspect to your story here, because, there's a lot of stories about acquisition, but you have kind of a story of being unacquired.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So what's interesting is getting into the agency world, Eddie and I were it wasn't our plan to ever build this agency to a point and then just get acquired, because it's one thing to build a product and then go through an acquisition. But when you're in the services game, then it's there's reasons to get acquired, and it's okay, well, if you get acquired, then you're just gonna have to start another agency back over 2 years later or whatever else, and then you have to build up that equity again. But let me give you the backstory on it. So in 2010 we started BuzzShift and got it fully running, working with more I would say startups, high growth startups that maybe had just raised their Series A. And so we were working with groups like Evernote and Everlane, and two guys out in the Valley. And so Evernote, note-taking app, I mean, I use it religiously, and we were helping them with go-to-market strategy. So we're working with a lot of these like tech companies, and then a lot of these mid-market brands. And so, fast forward, one of our clients was Landry's Corporation out of Houston. And so we're running like 42 of their accounts, which is like everything from Bubblegum Shrimp Company to Morton's. I mean, all these different restaurants and everything. And so they were doing a lot of Google AdWords. And so fast forward, we basically had fast-tracked this whole world of becoming what they call a Google Premier Partner, or Premier Google Partner, I should say. And so a Premier Google Partner means we're in the top 3% of all Google partners in the world. And so essentially we got this status because we're running a bunch of media dollars. And so this is in 2016, and this is in like March of 2016. And by July of 2016, we hit that status. We had a bunch of M&A teams like hitting us up because we're the small boutique digital strategy agency. And so we had like consultancies, large consultancies, not to be named right now, that were coming after us saying, hey, we're interested in talking with you guys. And then we had a lot of traditional ad agencies actually coming after us saying, hey, they wanted us to be kind of their bolt-on, agency. And so digital agency. And so and at that point, this one group out of Flower Mound called Ivy and Associates came to us and said, hey, we'll give you guys like they've been in the traditional world forever. There were 750 employees, and at the time we were like 24 people. And so we basically did this deal with Ivy, and we said, hey, we can be a part of a bigger unit and get a lot more support and kind of be the growth arm for this bigger agency. And so essentially what they did was they tripled our team. We went from like 24 to 78 people over 11 months. I mean, it was like a lot of people. And a lot of that was like doing a lot of spec work. They were, and which I wasn't necessarily a big believer in at all. And so they were trying to win existing client business and everything else. So long and short of it, we got acquired by this group that was a traditional agency. And then 11 months later, we got a call that said, hey, come out. The nice thing about Ivy, we really liked working with them. They let us actually work autonomously. So we had our great office in Design District. They were in Flower Mound. So if you think about it, like culture was everything for us. And so most of our people on our team were millennials. And I would say, the Ivy team skewed a little bit older, and they were in cubicles out there and everything else. So we just didn't want to really we wanted to come together, but we wanted some separation too. And everybody agreed on that. But here's the thing. I go from being co-founder and CEO to VP. So I have SVPs and EVPs and owners and everybody else above me. So everything's above my pay grade, right? So I can't make a lot of decisions at that point. And so essentially 11 months later, what we didn't know is at the time, Ivy was actually, they were in the process of being acquired themselves by a publicly traded company. And we didn't know that. And but they said, hey, would you guys be interested in taking back your company? And we're like, what does that mean? And we're like, do we have to give up all this 80% up front and all this money basically or whatever? And they're like, no, you can take back over your company and basically give up your 20% that we owe you guys. And we had to give up our salaries and bonuses and all that stuff. But we got our legacy clients back. All those legacy clients that we had already had pre-acquisition, they handed those back to us.
Wow.
So in 2 weeks, we had 10 attorneys working around the clock. I mean, it was all these attorneys working around the clock on their side and our side and everything else. And they let us buy our company back basically for pennies on the dollar. And so here we are, October of 2017, which is 11 months after acquisition. By November, I think it was November 15th of 2017, we went from 74 and they down to hiring back 13. A lot of them are original kind of BuzzShifters. And so we started the agency all over again. Huh. And it was wild. So we got some existing clients and everything out of that, but we said we wanted to grow this in a little bit different way. And so we moved into WeWork, instead of having their own building, and said, let's figure out where we really want to take this. And so our whole focus for the last year was we want to be known as a growth agency. And we had and not just a true digital strategy agency. We want to focus on just growing brands and be the growth agency. And so last year was our biggest year in 9 years,
awesome,
revenue-wise. So it was awesome. So we've had a good ride, and we're just honestly looking forward to what the adventure is and the journey is ahead.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Cameron, tell us about the podcast, the Growth Hack podcast that you're going to be launching here soon.
Yeah. So I'm super excited about this. At the end of the day, I've got to work with all these marketers and entrepreneurs. And, at the end of the day, I want to be able to share a lot of the stories, the strategies, and how brands can actually be more efficient and effective online with their growth strategy, their go-to-market overall. And I said, I need to get out there and actually talk. And we need to bring in other leaders that are working in these big growth agents or growth companies and have those people actually talk as well. And so beyond just building businesses, we want to really bring to light from a practitioner standpoint, this is what we're doing, and bring that to life. And so the growth hack is all about, how do we grow companies more efficiently? And so we're launching the growth hack actually this next week. And so very excited. It's on anchor.fm/growth hack, or you can find it on iTunes and everything else. So, and we'll put it on BuzzShift as well. So we're super excited. First podcast, we're going to be vodcasting it, I guess is what they would call it. But so it's video and podcasting, videocast. There's a bunch of words, terminology for it. So super excited about it, and stay tuned. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Cameron, how do people connect with you with BuzzShift? Tell us all that.
Yeah, so you can connect with me. Feel free to go to buzzshift.com, buzzshift.com, or you can connect with me at Cameron@buzzshift.com. I'm C. Gawley on every social channel, so literally continuity, really important on social. So CGAWLEY, like Gawley G. Bob. Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cameron, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'll make sure to have all of your contact information in the show notes.
For sure. Thanks.
Awesome.
Thanks again for having me.
Absolutely. And everyone else, thank you all for tuning in to another episode of the Pathways to Success. As always, make sure to subscribe, comment, and share. And we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Pathways to Success.